Welcome to the dark side of the spotlight. We all know BTS rules the K-pop universe, but what about the fierce rivals who tried to steal their crown? The industry is a brutal battlefield where one wrong move means game over. Have you ever wondered what happens when immense hype suddenly crashes into dead silence? What triggers a massive group to vanish just when they're about to touch the sky? Was it scandalous betrayals, toxic management, or a cruel twist of fate? Today, we uncover the heartbreaking downfalls of the idols who almost had it all. Are you ready to expose the shadows behind the blinding stage lights? Number 7. B.A.P. The Underground Kings Destroyed by Greed. A Tragedy of Stolen Crowns. Let's take a trip back to the glorious and ruthless battleground of the 2012 K-pop industry, a time when the Hallyu wave was experiencing a massive tectonic shift, and a monstrous rookie group debuted with a force so earth-shattering that even the prestigious Big Three agencies were shaking in their expensive boots. We are talking about Best Absolute Perfect, universally known as B.A.P., a six-member hip-hop powerhouse that didn't just casually step onto the stage, they completely obliterated it with their iconic debut track, Warrior, leaving audiences absolutely speechless. Imagine this wild scene: six fierce, bleached blonde young men stomping the ground with militaristic precision, spitting aggressive rap verses, and delivering a raw, unapologetic, fierce energy that the polished, pop-centric industry hadn't seen in years. In 2012, B.A.P. was the absolute gold standard of rookies, winning virtually every major newcomer award, holding massive international tours almost immediately after their debut, and genuinely standing toe-to-toe with SM Entertainment's Golden Boys, EXO, in what was widely considered the most legendary and intense rookie rivalry of the entire decade. While BTS would debut a whole year later in 2013 with a very similar rebellious, anti-establishment hip-hop concept, B.A.P. was already completely dominating that exact space, captivating millions of fans worldwide with their highly socially conscious lyrics, dark atmospheric concepts, and unyielding on-stage charisma that made them look like 10-year veterans rather than fresh rookies. Hits like Oneshot, No Mercy, and Power weren't just catchy songs on a Spotify playlist, they were aggressive cultural anthems for a generation of fans who felt completely alienated by mainstream bubblegum pop, fearlessly addressing heavy topics like societal pressure, political corruption, and the violent fight for justice long before it became a trendy marketing tactic for modern idol groups. B.A.P. was undeniably on the fast track to absolute global supremacy, holding a massive, loud, and fiercely loyal fandom called babies, and many veteran industry insiders confidently placed their heavy bets on them to become the undisputed kings of the third generation of K-pop, completely surpassing anyone in their path. They literally had every single piece of the puzzle: the visionary leadership, deep voice, and underground grit of Bang Jungkook, the gravity-defying LTE speed rap skills of giant maknae Zello, the soul-piercing, stratosphere-reaching high notes of main vocal Daehyun, the smooth, honey-like vocal colors of Youngjae, the striking traditional visuals of Himchan, and the unmatched, bone-breaking breakdancing prowess of Jungkook. But right behind the deafening cheers of their sold-out global arena tours, the massive million-dollar music video budgets featuring tanks and helicopters, and the blinding flashes of camera lenses at airports, lurked a horrifying pitch-black nightmare orchestrated by the very people who were legally obligated to protect and nurture them. Enter TS Entertainment, an agency that would very soon become completely infamous for instigating one of the most heartbreaking, infuriating, and disastrous controversies in modern K-pop history, a scandal that still makes fans' blood boil to this very day. as B.A.P was working their fingers to the absolute bone, releasing consecutive mini-albums and full studio records at a breakneck pace, learning grueling choreographies in the dead of night, and traveling across the globe with absolutely zero time to breathe or sleep, the sheer exhaustion began to take a severe physical and mental toll on the young members. We are talking about horrifying, verified reports of members literally collapsing backstage from sheer fatigue, being rushed to emergency rooms in the middle of promotions, and ruthlessly forced to perform on live television with medical IV drips still visibly bandaged to their bruised arms, just to satisfy the agency's relentless money-hungry schedule. But the physical torture was only the tip of the dark iceberg, because in November 2014, right when they were supposed to finally solidify their untouchable spot at the absolute top of the global industry and embark on massive, highly profitable stadium tours, the entire K-pop world was stunned into absolute dead silence when all 6 members bravely filed a massive lawsuit against TS Entertainment to completely nullify their exclusive contracts, exposing a grotesque reality of modern-day slavery that sent massive shockwaves through the entire nation. The details revealed in the court documents were utterly sickening to read. Despite generating an estimated $10 million in astronomical revenue for the company over a grueling 3-year period of non-stop promotions, each member was reportedly paid a pathetic, insulting fraction of a fraction, amounting to roughly $18,000 for years of literal back-breaking labor, essentially living in literal poverty while working themselves to the absolute brink of death under a deeply unfair parasitic profit distribution ratio that heavily favored the agency's greedy executives. Imagine being hailed as international superstars, having your face plastered on giant billboards across Seoul, Tokyo, and New York, being mobbed by thousands of screaming fans wherever you go, yet not even having enough personal money in your bank account to buy a decent hot meal, pay for basic medical bills, or help your struggling, heartbroken families back home, all while your agency's upper echelons lined their luxurious pockets and bought expensive cars with your literal blood, sweat, and tears. This intense, ugly legal battle forced B.A.P into a devastating and prolonged hiatus that lasted over a year and a half, completely paralyzing their unstoppable momentum at the absolute crucial turning point of their entire career. And this, my friends, is exactly where the tragic shift in the K-pop universe finally happened, altering the course of history forever. While B.A.P was trapped in a suffocating, terrifying legal limbo, desperately fighting in cold courtrooms for their basic human rights, fair financial compensation, and artistic freedom, the fast-paced K-pop landscape was rapidly evolving without them, and a hungry, fiercely ambitious group named BTS, who had been steadily building their own underground narrative, suddenly caught massive fire with their emotional, youth-centric, and cinematic I Need You era in 2015. The very hip-hop throne that B.A.P had to painfully and unwillingly abandon to fight for their lives was left wide open, and BTS flawlessly stepped up to claim it, capturing the hearts of wandering global fans with their authentic storytelling, high-quality self-production, and incredible team synergy that resonated deeply with the youth. By the time B.A.P finally, exhaustingly reached a settlement with TS Entertainment in late 2015 and triumphantly returned to the stage with the ironically titled self-produced anthem Young, Wild, and Free, the catastrophic damage was already irreparably done. The massive, world-conquering hype had completely evaporated. The fickle, casual public had aggressively moved on to newer, fresher faces, and the insurmountable gap between them and the new rising kings of K-pop had become too far to ever close again, no matter how hard they tried. The tragedy of B.A.P. isn't that they lacked the raw talent, the stunning visuals, or the blinding star power to rival BTS, because they absolutely had every single weapon in their arsenal to conquer the entire world music scene and become household names globally. But they were viciously and systematically sabotaged from the inside out by the grotesque greed of an agency that treated them like disposable money-making machines, rather than actual human beings with dreams, limits, and souls. Watching them slowly fade from the blinding spotlight over the following years, struggling with severe mental health issues, devastating panic disorders, and the agonizing, suffocating weight of unfulfilled potential, before eventually going their separate ways, is a haunting, terrifying reminder of how unbelievably fragile fame really is in this cutthroat entertainment industry. Number 6. Topp Dogg, the 13-member hip-hop army crushed by chaos, a dream swallowed by betrayal. Step right back into the highly competitive, absolutely cutthroat battleground of 2013, a truly fascinating and defining year in the grand history of K-pop, where a brand new, terrifyingly ambitious boy group boldly stepped out of the shadows to declare absolute war on the industry, armed to the teeth with a massive roster and a hardcore hip-hop identity that made everyone instantly turn their heads. We're talking about the incredibly talented, massively overlooked, and ultimately tragic hip-hop syndicate known as Topp Dogg, a colossal 13-member powerhouse meticulously assembled and produced by the legendary first-generation Korean hip-hop pioneer Cho PD under the banner of Stardom Entertainment. When they aggressively burst onto the scene with their high-octane debut track, Follow Me, the entire K-pop community was genuinely buzzing with a mixture of awe, skepticism, and undeniable excitement, because Topp Dogg wasn't just your average run-of-the-mill rookie group. They were a highly strategic, calculated musical weapon designed to simultaneously rival the sheer numerical dominance of SM Entertainment's megagroup EXO, and completely overpower the underground, gritty hip-hop narrative that a rookie group named BTS was desperately trying to build at that exact same time. The sheer scale and raw ambition of Topp Dogg were genuinely mind-boggling, as they were neatly divided into specialized subunits: dragons, knights, wizards, and lions, boasting an overwhelming array of self-producing talents, jaw-dropping underground rappers, phenomenal vocalists, and gravity-defying street dancers who looked like they were ready to swallow the entire world whole. If you look back at their early discography, you will find absolute hidden masterpieces like Arario, a wildly innovative, visually stunning, and culturally groundbreaking track that masterfully fused aggressive hip-hop beats with traditional Korean classical instruments, masks, and fans, executing a fiercely patriotic and unique concept, years before it became a massive global trend for other top-tier groups to utilize on the world stage. They were undeniably ahead of their time, radiating a wild, unpolished, and dangerous energy that instantly captivated a growing, dedicated international fandom known as Top Class, and for a fleeting, beautiful moment, it genuinely felt like this 13-member titan was going to absolutely steamroll the competition and establish themselves as the undisputed kings of the new generation. Industry critics and fans alike constantly drew direct, intense comparisons between Topp Dogg and BTS, as both groups debuted in the exact same year, both leaned heavily into authentic hip-hop culture, both featured members with deep underground roots, and both fiercely prided themselves on writing and producing their own music in an era heavily dominated by manufactured factory idols. But while BTS was slowly, painstakingly building a massive, impenetrable fortress of global support under a small but fiercely dedicated and highly supportive agency that prioritized their mental health and artistic growth, Topp Dogg was unknowingly walking straight into a devastating, inescapable nightmare, trapped inside a deeply toxic, financially ruinous, and criminally mismanaged agency that would slowly bleed their dreams completely completely dry. The horrific, heartbreaking downfall of Topp Dogg wasn't a sudden, explosive crash, but rather a slow, agonizing, and painful decay, characterized by a seemingly endless, deeply depressing string of member departures that completely shattered the hearts of their loyal fans as the original 13 members began to mysteriously drop out one by one due to extreme exhaustion, crippling financial issues, and severe mismanagement. It started as a trickle and quickly became a devastating flood, with fan favorites like Saegong, Gon, and Kido shockingly walking away from the group, exposing dark, chilling rumors of internal company conflicts, zero financial compensation for their literal blood, sweat, and tears, and an utterly incompetent management team that had absolutely no idea how to properly handle a group of that massive size and potential. The ultimate crushing blow came when it was shockingly revealed to the public that the group's own creator and CEO, Cho PD, had allegedly pocketed hundreds of thousands of dollars from the group's Japanese tour earnings, leading to a highly publicized, deeply humiliating legal battle and his eventual conviction for fraud, completely leaving the remaining deeply traumatized members stranded in the cold, dark abyss of the forgotten K-pop wasteland, without a captain to steer their sinking ship. Imagine the sheer suffocating psychological torment of watching your direct rivals, BTS, slowly ascend to the very pinnacle of global music history, winning massive day songs, breaking Billboard records, and selling out international stadiums, while you are trapped in a crumbling, bankrupt company, watching your brothers leave one by one, forced to change your group name to Xeno T in a desperate, ultimately futile attempt to rebrand and survive in an industry that had already completely forgotten your name. The sheer tragedy of Topp Dogg is a deeply painful, hauntingly beautiful reminder of how absolutely cruel and unforgiving the K-pop industry can be. Because raw talent, incredible music, and a massive diverse lineup are completely meaningless if the adults in the boardroom are solely focused on lining their own greedy pockets instead of nurturing the precious artistic souls entrusted to their care. Watching the remnants of this once glorious hip-hop army desperately try to salvage their careers on harsh, humiliating survival shows like The Unit, fighting through tears, severe anxiety, and the heavy, crushing weight of their shattered dreams just for one last ounce of public recognition, is enough to make even the most hardened K-pop fan weep in sheer frustration. It forces us to look back at the mesmerizing, powerful choreography of Arario and aggressively wonder, what if Stardom Entertainment had actually protected them, invested in their brilliant self-produced music, and kept the 13 members united as an unstoppable creative force? Could Topp Dogg have been the massive, undisputed hip-hop titans standing right next to BTS on the global stage, proudly waving the flag of Korean culture to millions of screaming fans worldwide? Or was their wildly ambitious concept always destined to spectacularly implode under the crushing, suffocating weight of sheer human greed and corporate betrayal? The devastating reality is that we will never, ever get to see the true breathtaking potential of what Topp Dogg could have ultimately achieved, and their heartbreaking story will forever remain one of the most painfully tragic, fiercely debated, and intensely emotional casualties in the brutal, unrelenting war for K-pop supremacy, leaving us all to desperately ask, who is truly to blame when a diamond is shattered before it even has the chance to shine? Number 5. Boys Republic, the Universal Princes eclipsed by the underdogs, a heartbreaking tale of stolen destiny. Let's hit the rewind button and travel straight back to the scorching hot summer of June 2013, an absolutely legendary month that would unknowingly alter the entire fabric of the K-pop universe forever, setting the stage for one of the most painfully ironic and historically significant rivalries the industry has ever witnessed. If you were a dedicated K-pop fan back then, you absolutely remember the intense head-to-head debut battle between two highly anticipated rookie boy groups who stepped onto the music show stages within mere days of each other, representing two completely opposite ends of the industry spectrum. On one side, you had BTS, the gritty, aggressive hip-hop underdogs from a near-bankrupt agency called Big Hit Entertainment, wearing cheap clothes and rapping about societal suppression. On the exact opposite side, shining with the blinding polish of massive corporate backing, was Boys Republic, a flawlessly produced five-member unit backed by the sheer, terrifying global financial power of Universal Music Group, one of the biggest and most influential record labels on the entire planet. Boys Republic wasn't just another random group trying their luck. They were Universal Music's very first K-pop idol project, heavily funded, heavily promoted, and heavily expected to become the absolute dominant force of the new generation. Comprised of members Wonjin, Sunwoo, Sungjin, Minsu, and Suwon, they debuted with the unbelievably catchy, upbeat, and radio-friendly pop anthem Party Rock, instantly capturing the public's attention and projecting the image of wealthy, untouchable princes who were already halfway to the finish line before the race even truly began. At the very beginning of this historic rivalry, the massive corporate advantage was crystal clear, and Boys Republic actually seemed to be winning the war, securing a massive commercial CF deal with Jeju Air right out of the gate, a highly prestigious contract usually strictly reserved for top-tier established superstars, and snatching up prestigious rookie awards like the New Star Award at the Asian Model Festival Awards, while BTS was still struggling to get their music videos played on mainstream broadcast television. Can you imagine the immense, suffocating pressure of being legally bound to a global music empire, tasked with conquering the Asian market and actually succeeding right from the jump? But the incredibly fickle and ruthless K-pop industry is a terrifying beast that does not care about your financial backing or your early trophies, and very quickly, the blinding spotlight began to mysteriously and painfully shift away from the polished princes of Universal Music. While BTS was desperately grinding in the dirt, painfully carving out a highly relatable, heavily serialized, and deeply emotional youth narrative that resonated with struggling teenagers across the globe, Boys Republic's management completely fumbled their massive early momentum by struggling to give the group a cohesive, long-term musical identity. They violently bounced from the cheerful pop of party rock to the quirky experimental electronic beats of video game, and then to the sleek suit and tie maturity of the real one, leaving casual fans deeply confused and completely unable to emotionally connect with a group that seemed to change their entire personality every single comeback. The tragic reality of K-pop is that pure talent and massive budgets mean absolutely nothing if you cannot build an unbreakable, deeply emotional bond with a loyal fandom, and Boys Republic was slowly bleeding out in the freezing cold shadow of BTS's explosive, organic rise. The heartbreaking climax of their painful struggle for survival came in 2016 when the group decided to throw absolutely everything they had left into one final, desperate, and incredibly dark transformation, releasing the unbelievably visually stunning and aggressive masterpiece, Get Down, a song that featured literal decapitations and raw, fierce rebellion in its music video, earning an agonizing 19+ rating that completely banned it from major broadcasting networks. It was a massive fatal blow to their heavily budgeted comeback, but the true tragedy struck behind closed doors during a grueling 3 a.m. dance practice when main dancer Minsu suffered a horrific, devastating head injury after accidentally colliding with the ceiling, resulting in a terrifying 7-centimeter gash that required urgent emergency surgery and completely halted their desperately needed promotions.
From that terrifying, bloody moment on, the once glorious empire of Boys Republic began to rapidly crumble into absolute dust, leading the deeply exhausted, emotionally shattered members to make the most humiliating, soul-crushing decision of their entire lives, swallowing their immense pride and entering the brutal 2017 KBS Idol survival show, The Unit, essentially admitting to the entire world that they had failed. Watching Suwon, who actually almost debuted with BTS at Big Hit before leaving to join Boys Republic, break down in agonizing tears on national television as he confessed how utterly humiliating it was to perform his failed songs for a panel of judges, is a scene that will forever haunt the nightmares of any true K-pop fan, completely shattering the glamorous illusion of the idol industry. Despite their desperate, tear-soaked efforts on the show, the cruel hand of fate had already sealed their tragic destiny, and in September 2018, Boys Republic held one final, overwhelmingly heartbreaking farewell concert for their crying, deeply loyal fans, before officially entering an indefinite hiatus, a polite industry term for a permanent disbandment. It forces us to sit back in absolute silence, stare at the ceiling, and ask the ultimate, chilling question. What happens when you are handed the golden ticket by the biggest music company in the world, yet you are still forced to watch your absolute biggest, dirt-poor rival slowly conquer the entire universe while your own dreams violently crash and burn? Was their heartbreaking downfall caused by a catastrophic failure in management, a complete lack of a relatable identity, or simply the cruel, unforgiving timing of debuting in the exact same month as the most legendary musical act in modern history? The devastating tragedy of Boys Republic serves as a dark, eternal reminder that in the vicious, blood-stained arena of K-pop, corporate millions cannot buy a soul, and sometimes the kings who start with everything are the ones who ultimately lose it all, leaving behind nothing but a fading echo of what could have been.
Number 4. MADTOWN, the high-flying acrobats betrayed by the shadows, a nightmare of corporate collapse. Step right into the wildly explosive, heavily saturated arena of 2014, a year when the hip-hop idol trend was aggressively dominating the K-pop landscape, and a fierce new 7-member beast was unleashed by J-Tune Camp, the exact same legendary agency that birthed the iconic second-generation titans M-Black. We are talking about MADTOWN, an immensely talented, high-flying, and unapologetically rebellious septet consisting of Moose, Daewon, Lee Gun, Jota, Hyeojeon, Buffy, and H.O., who burst onto the incredibly crowded scene with their infectious high-energy debut track YOLO, armed with a terrifyingly impressive arsenal of acrobatic street dancing, gritty underground rap flows, and a raw, untamed charisma that immediately set them apart from the standard, overly polished idol rookies of the time. During this exact era, BTS was relentlessly fighting their way up the steep industry ladder with aggressive youth-driven tracks like Danger and Boy in Love, trying to prove that hip-hop idols could actually be taken seriously, and MADTOWN emerged as a highly formidable, fiercely competitive contemporary operating in that very same gritty, bad boy wheelhouse, boasting a massive amount of self-producing talent and an undeniable stage presence that genuinely threatened to shake up the entire third-generation hierarchy. They were not just pretending to be tough, they were actual street performers and underground artists who brought a refreshing, wildly authentic energy to the broadcasting stations, earning them a rapidly growing, fiercely loyal international fandom known as Mad People, who firmly believed that these 7 boys were destined for absolute global greatness. Their highly addictive follow-up releases, like the aggressively catchy OMGT and the emotionally charged Emptiness, showcased a stunningly versatile musical range, proving they could seamlessly switch from hard-hitting, acrobatic hype tracks to deeply soulful, vocal-heavy R&B anthems without ever losing their signature rebellious edge. But the absolute golden ticket for MADTOWN, the very thing that was supposed to launch them directly into the stratosphere of mainstream Korean public recognition and secure their spot right next to the biggest groups in the world, was the sudden, explosive variety show fame of their incredibly athletic member, Jota. When Jota stepped onto the wildly popular national television show Cool Kids on the Block, showcasing his breathtaking, jaw-dropping background as a competitive judo athlete, he didn't just win a few matches, he completely stole the entire nation's heart, going viral for his incredible physical strength, his deeply emotional, tear-filled victories on the judo mat, and his incredibly humble, soft-spoken personality that sharply contrasted with his shredded gladiator-like physique. Jota became an absolute household name overnight, securing highly lucrative solo endorsement deals, appearing on primetime broadcasts, and successfully funneling massive, unprecedented amounts of mainstream attention directly back to MADTOWN, creating the absolute perfect golden opportunity for the group to finally secure their highly anticipated first music show win and solidify their legacy as top-tier K-pop contenders. However, in a deeply sickening, utterly horrifying twist of fate that completely exposed the darkest, most parasitic, and highly unregulated underbelly of the Korean entertainment industry, the massive success they were desperately building was violently ripped away from them by the grotesque incompetence and criminal greed of the adults in charge. Right when MADTOWN was standing on the absolute precipice of a massive commercial breakthrough, their original agency, J-Tune Camp, shockingly went completely bankrupt in late 2016, and in a shady, deeply unethical, behind-the-closed-doors business transaction, the agency secretly sold the group's exclusive contracts to a brand-new, completely unknown entity called GNI Entertainment for roughly 300 million won, essentially trading these 7 human beings like cheap cattle without even giving them a single word of warning. If being sold off like disposable merchandise wasn't terrifyingly traumatic enough, the absolute nightmare had barely even begun, because almost immediately after MADTOWN was transferred to their new agency, the CEO of GNI Entertainment was shockingly arrested for heavily orchestrating a massive multi-million-dollar fraud and embezzlement scheme, instantly leaving the entire company completely paralyzed, severely bankrupt, and totally abandoned. Overnight, the entire infrastructure supporting MADTOWN violently evaporated into thin air. The agency staff, the managers, the stylists, and the public relations teams all rightfully fled the sinking ship because they weren't getting paid, leaving the 7 members completely stranded, financially ruined, and legally trapped inside an empty, rotting corporate shell with absolutely no one to help them. Can you even begin to imagine the sheer suffocating terror of being recognized by thousands of fans on the street, having your music videos played on national television, and yet returning to a freezing, pitch-black dormitory because the agency stopped paying the utility bills, leaving you with no electricity, no running water, and absolutely no food in the refrigerator? The horrific reality of their daily lives became an agonizing, desperate fight for basic human survival, as the deeply traumatized members were brutally forced to fund their own idle activities out of their own empty pockets, pooling together whatever pathetic pennies they had left to rent cheap vehicles, drive themselves to various broadcast schedules, beg for leftover hair and makeup sponsorships, and directly negotiate with ruthless broadcast networks just to keep their dying dream on life support.
It is deeply heartbreaking, sickening, and profoundly infuriating to look back at the historical K-pop timeline and realize that while BTS was majestically spreading their wings in late 2016, releasing the iconic world-shattering Blood, Sweat, and Tears, breaking massive Billboard records, and securing their legendary First Day song, the boys of MADTOWN were desperately fighting a grueling, soul-crushing legal battle in a cold, unforgiving courtroom, begging a judge to legally sever their contracts with a criminal ghost agency just so they wouldn't be violently evicted onto the literal streets. Despite eventually winning their grueling lawsuit and gaining their highly coveted freedom, the catastrophic psychological and financial damage was already irreparably done, totally shattering their youthful spirits, completely destroying their unyielding passion for music, and forcing the group into a highly depressing, deeply tragic permanent disbandment that left their loyal fans screaming into the void for a justice that would never, ever come.
Number 3. HOTSHOT, the elite supergroup trapped in a ghost town, a masterpiece left to rot. Step directly into the intensely competitive, blood-pumping atmosphere of late 2014, a fascinating transitional period when the Korean music industry was aggressively searching for the next big hip-hop sensation, and prepare to have your heart completely shattered by the infuriating, mind-boggling tragedy of a group that literally had the entire world handed to them on a silver platter, only to watch it violently rot in a pitch-black basement. We are talking about the incredibly legendary, vastly overqualified, and historically mishandled six-member supergroup known as HOTSHOT, a team so overwhelmingly overflowing with god-tier talent that even the biggest idols in the industry were completely intimidated by their sheer presence. When they aggressively kicked down the door with their hard-hitting, fiercely self-choreographed debut track Take a Shot, they weren't just a group of wide-eyed rookies hoping for a lucky break. They were an absolute terrifying assembly of elite K-pop veterans, underground kings, and legendary trainees who had already conquered the hardest training systems in the entire country. Let's break down this monstrous lineup. You had Ha Sung-woon, a vocal powerhouse whose golden pipes could effortlessly shatter glass and bring audiences to tears. Ro Tae-yoon, an absolute monster of a main dancer who was previously a legendary member of the world-renowned underground crumping crew Monster Wu Fam. Yoon-sun, a brilliant rapper who lived in France and brought an incredibly sophisticated, raw European underground flow to the table. Jungkook, a highly skilled self-producing genius. Hojung, an incredible visual with a beautifully unique vocal tone. And finally, Timoteo, a massively famous former SM Entertainment trainee who was originally slated to debut in EXO and was universally known as the best friend of Chinese Taemin, EXO's Kai, and BTS's very own Jimin. In fact, HOTSHOT was so deeply respected by the top-tier elites of the industry that Timoteo and Sung-woon were founding members of the legendary Padding Squad, an exclusive, highly famous friend group consisting of K-pop's absolute biggest global superstars, including Jimin himself, proving beyond a shadow of a doubt that these boys weren't just random rookies, they were highly respected peers who possessed the exact same immense star power, raw stage presence, and artistic genius as the reigning kings of the third generation. During those crucial early years, HOTSHOT and BTS were operating in very similar sonic territories, both fiercely leaning into aggressive hip-hop beats, complex choreography, and authentic, self-made artistry. And many industry insiders confidently predicted that HOTSHOT would rapidly ascend to become a massive, unstoppable rival in the boy group arena.
However, while BTS was being carefully nurtured, fiercely protected, and strategically guided by a visionary company that allowed them to slowly build a massive global empire, HOTSHOT was tragically handed over to Star Crew Entertainment, an absolute abysmal, financially crumbling, and shockingly incompetent agency that completely suffocated their golden goose before it even had a chance to lay a single egg. After a few incredibly promising releases like Watch Out, the company shockingly slammed on the brakes, locking this incredibly talented group in a freezing, pitch-black dungeon of inactivity for literal years, completely killing all their explosive debut momentum and leaving the members to slowly lose their minds as they watched their close friends in EXO and BTS take over the entire globe, sell out massive international stadiums, and win prestigious day songs, while they were trapped at home doing absolutely nothing. The sheer, suffocating desperation of watching their dreams violently evaporate into thin air eventually forced the deeply traumatized, heavily depressed members to swallow their immense pride and make a terrifying, high-stakes gamble for survival by throwing themselves into the brutal, soul-crushing arena of idol survival shows. In 2017, Sungwoon and Taeyoon bravely stepped onto the highly terrifying stage of Produce 101 Season 2, shedding agonizing tears as they confessed how incredibly humiliating it was to be labeled as failed idols despite their immense talents, and the public was absolutely mesmerized by their raw, undeniable skill. Taeyoon went massively viral, single-handedly choreographing a legendary jaw-dropping dance performance to Ed Sheeran's Shape of You that is still universally praised as the greatest stage in the entire history of the Produce franchise, eventually leading to his wildly successful debut in the mega-popular fan-created project group JBJ. Meanwhile, Sungwoon completely captured the nation's heart with his angelic vocals and unbreakable determination, successfully fighting his way into the final lineup of 101, a colossal, historically massive project group that literally rivaled BTS and EXO in physical sales, public recognition, and sheer global dominance during their explosive, world-conquering tenure. But the fight for survival didn't stop there, because shortly after, Timoteo and Hojung threw themselves into a completely different survival show called The Unit, where Timoteo beautifully proved his legendary status by ranking first place for almost the entire duration of the broadcast, while Hojung successfully debuted in the final winning group UNB. Let this absolutely mind-blowing fact sink in for a moment. HOTSHOT had a member in 101, a member in JBJ, and a member in UNB, collectively commanding millions of fiercely loyal, wealthy, and hungry fans who were absolutely desperate to throw massive amounts of money at a full HOTSHOT reunion comeback once these temporary project groups inevitably disbanded. They had miraculously achieved the impossible, completely reviving their dead careers from the ashes and handing their agency the absolute perfect golden opportunity to launch them straight into the highest echelons of K-pop superstardom, practically guaranteeing them massive music show wins, sold-out arena tours, and millions of dollars in revenue. And what did Star Crew Entertainment do with this unbelievable, once-in-a-lifetime miracle? They absolutely, spectacularly, and violently fumbled it in the most infuriating display of corporate incompetence the K-pop industry has ever witnessed. Instead of uniting this highly famous, newly rejuvenated supergroup and striking while the iron was scorching hot, the agency completely bungled their scheduling, forcing members into disjointed, poorly promoted solo activities, releasing one heavily delayed, poorly marketed mini-album without Sungwoon, and then shockingly locking the entire group right back into the exact same pitch-black silent dungeon they had just desperately fought so hard to escape. For 3 agonizing, deeply depressing years, the group was subjected to absolute, deafening radio silence, completely bleeding out their massive newfound fandom, wasting the precious golden years of their youth, and breaking the hearts of millions of fans who begged, screamed, and protested outside the company headquarters for just a single comeback, all to no avail. Ultimately, in 2021, the company coldly and quietly announced HOTSHOT's official disbandment, a deeply anticlimactic, completely heartbreaking end to a group that genuinely had the talent, the industry connections, and the massive second-chance public momentum to stand right next to BTS on the global stage. It forces us to clench our fists in sheer frustration and ask the ultimate painful question: how can a company be handed a winning lottery ticket, a group of self-producing geniuses who were universally respected by the biggest superstars on the planet, and still manage to tear it into 1,000 pieces and throw it into the fire? The utterly devastating tale of HOTSHOT is a dark, haunting, and permanent reminder that in the terrifying, cutthroat world of K-pop, sheer artistic brilliance and unbreakable willpower mean absolutely nothing if the people holding your contract are too blind to see the blinding light of the stars they are crushing in their hands.
Number 2. Speed. The gravity-defying Mavericks crushed by sabotage, a masterclass in wasted potential. Step directly back into the intensely competitive high-stakes battleground of early 2013, a wildly chaotic and fascinating era in the K-pop industry, where rookie groups were desperately trying to outdance, out-rap, and outperform each other to claim the rapidly forming third-generation throne and prepare to uncover the deeply infuriating, heartbreaking story of a group that literally put their lives on the line for fame, only to be crushed by the sheer incompetence of their own creators. We are talking about the breathtakingly talented, gravity-defying, and historically overlooked 7-member powerhouse known as Speed, a group that was actually born from the chaotic ashes of the mixed-gender project Co-ed School, carrying an immense amount of pressure to succeed in a notoriously cutthroat market. Originally consisting of incredibly gifted members like Taewoon, who is famously known as the older brother of hip-hop superstar Zico, alongside Junwoo, Sungmin, Jungkook, Sejun, Yuwon, and Taeha, Speed initially debuted under the banner of Core Contents Media, an agency that would later rebrand as the absolutely infamous MBK Entertainment. When they first burst onto the scene, the company actually invested a massive, astronomical amount of money into their debut, releasing a heartbreaking, blockbuster-level music video set during the tragic Gwangju uprising for their tracks That's My Fault and It's Over, starring A-list actors like Park Bo-young and Ji Chang-wook, which immediately proved that this group was intended to be a top-tier, mainstream-dominating force. However, right around this exact same time, a scrappy, deeply aggressive hip-hop group named BTS was just stepping onto the stage, fiercely claiming the title of Performance Kings with their razor-sharp synchronization, rebellious attitude, and iconic stunts like Jimin's famous back kicks in No More Dream. In a desperate, high-octane bid to completely obliterate the competition and steal the performance crown, Speed made a legendary, terrifying pivot in 2014 by releasing the wildly aggressive, circus-themed hip-hop anthem Don't Tease Me, executing a jaw-dropping, heart-stopping choreography that still genuinely leaves modern K-pop fans absolutely speechless to this very day. This wasn't just standard idol dancing, this was lethal, high-flying, death-defying acrobatics, where member Sungmin would literally sprint, launch himself high into the air, and perform a blind, massive somersault clear over the heads of 3 standing members without a single safety wire or protective mat in sight, risking severe, career-ending spinal injuries every single time they performed on a slippery broadcasting stage.
While BTS was capturing the hearts of the youth with their relatable lyrics, Speed was visually terrifying and awe-inspiring the public with their raw, untamed athleticism, creating a fierce, unspoken rivalry for the title of the third generation's ultimate performance unit, earning them massive viral attention and a dedicated fandom who recognized their unmatched, superhuman physical dedication. They pushed the absolute boundaries of human physics even further with their 2015 masterpiece, What You?, where the entire group spent months enduring agonizing pain, severe bruising, and literally bleeding on practice room floors to master the incredibly difficult art of dancing in Heelys, shoes with hidden wheels in the soles, executing razor-sharp, heavily synchronized hip-hop routines while seamlessly gliding across the stage at breakneck speeds, a wildly innovative and insanely dangerous concept that absolutely no other K-pop group has ever dared to attempt since. They were the undisputed, fearless mavericks of K-pop choreography, possessing the raw vocal talent, the fierce underground rapping skills courtesy of Taewoon, and a visual spectacle that should have easily cemented them as global stadium-selling legends, standing proudly side by side with BTS in the history books. But just like a devastating curse that inevitably swallows the brightest stars, Speed was hopelessly trapped inside the deeply toxic, financially ruinous, and utterly incompetent management of MBK Entertainment, a company that was already notoriously hated by the general public for completely mishandling and destroying the legendary girl group Tiara. Despite Speed literally risking their lives, breaking their bones, and going massively viral for their mind-blowing performances, the agency completely abandoned them in the dark, failing to provide them with basic promotional activities, canceling highly anticipated fan meetings, and brutally starving them of any actual budget to continue their momentum. Imagine the sheer, suffocating psychological torment of performing life-threatening, gravity-defying backflips on national television, being praised as the greatest dancers in the industry by your peers, only to return to a deeply depressing, freezing dormitory because your agency refuses to book you any commercial gigs, completely halting your hard-earned rise to superstardom while you are forced to watch your direct rivals, BTS, slowly conquer the Billboard charts and build a multi-million-dollar global empire. The overwhelming, crushing despair of this gross mismanagement eventually became far too much to bear, leading the group's brilliant leader and main rapper Taewoon to shockingly depart from the team just to survive, throwing himself into the brutal underground arena of Show Me the Money to salvage his shattered musical dreams, which served as the fatal, agonizing death blow to the group's fragile foundation. By late 2015, MBK Entertainment quietly and completely erased Speed's profile from their official website, executing a coward's disbandment without even giving the deeply traumatized members or their fiercely loyal, crying fans the basic human dignity of a proper farewell announcement, leaving behind a chilling, utterly heartbreaking void in the K-pop universe. It forces every single fan to stare at their awe-inspiring, high-flying dance practice videos with tears welling in their eyes and ask the ultimate, painful question: what if Speed had been signed to an agency that actually respected their immense artistry, protected their physical well-being, and fiercely promoted their genius concepts to the global market? Could they have been the undisputed performance kings of the entire world, dominating massive international tours with their gravity-defying spectacles? Or were they always just deeply unfortunate pawns in a sick corporate game orchestrated by executives who couldn't care less about the bleeding boys in the roller shoes? Their utterly devastating, tear-inducing downfall remains one of the most painfully tragic, deeply infuriating masterclasses in wasted potential in the entire history of Korean entertainment, serving as a dark, eternal warning that in this ruthless industry you can literally fly higher than anyone else, but if the company clips your wings, you will still violently crash into the dirt.
Number 1 iKON, the monster rookies, destroyed by scandal, a royal empire crumbled to dust. Step into the incredibly chaotic, violently competitive, and historically massive arena of 2015, a year that is universally recognized by K-pop historians as the ultimate defining tipping point for the entire third generation of boy groups, and prepare to confront the most spectacular, heartbreaking, and mind-boggling downfall of an absolute musical titan in the history of the Korean wave. We are talking about the undisputed, terrifyingly powerful monster rookies of YG Entertainment, the 7-member hip-hop powerhouse known to the entire screaming world as iKON. When you think of a group that was specifically meticulously designed in a corporate laboratory to completely conquer the globe, rival BTS's explosive rise, and inherit the legendary untouchable throne of Big Bang, iKON was the absolute perfect, flawless weapon forged in fire. Formed through not just one, but two brutal, psychologically torturous, and highly publicized television survival shows, Win, Who Is Next, and Mix and Match, these 7 boys, B.I, Bobby, Jinhwan, June, Yoonyoung, Donghyuk, and Chanwoo, were not your average, wide-eyed rookies hoping for a lucky break. They were blood-soaked, battle-hardened, and incredibly famous superstars long before they even officially debuted on a broadcast stage. The sheer, overwhelming magnitude of their pre-debut hype was completely unprecedented in the history of the industry, largely driven by their 2 terrifyingly talented foundational pillars: B.I, a prodigious, self-producing genius and fiercely charismatic leader who crafted melodies like a seasoned veteran, and Bobby, a monstrous, aggressive rapper who achieved the absolutely unthinkable feat of winning the ruthless, cutthroat underground hip-hop survival show, Show Me the Money 3, before even debuting as an idol, a legendary milestone that commanded immense respect from even the harshest hip-hop critics. During this exact, highly pivotal time frame, a hungry, heavily underrated group named BTS was just starting to aggressively break into the mainstream consciousness with their cinematic, deeply emotional, and youth-oriented The Most Beautiful Moment in Life era, violently fighting to prove that authentic, self-producing hip-hop idols could rule the world without a massive agency backing them. The direct, explosive rivalry between iKON and BTS was completely unavoidable, fiercely intense, and absolutely legendary, sparking some of the most massive, bloody, and relentless fan wars the K-pop internet has ever witnessed, because both groups were aggressively fighting tooth and nail for the exact same highly coveted crown of authenticity. When iKON finally dropped their highly anticipated official debut track, My Type, followed by the hard-hitting, aggressive anthem, Rhythm Ta, they completely obliterated the digital charts, effortlessly sweeping every single major Rookie of the Year award at the end of 2015, and solidifying themselves as the undisputed, invincible kings of the new era. As the grueling years furiously marched on, this intense, high-stakes rivalry reached an absolute scorching boiling point in the legendary year of 2018, a time when BTS was violently smashing global Billboard records, entering the American mainstream and dominating the international stage with massive hits like Fake Love and Idol. But right back at home in the streets of South Korea, it was iKON who completely, absolutely, and undeniably ruled the entire nation with an iron fist, dropping the monumental, historically massive mega hit, Love Scenario. This incredibly catchy track wasn't just a popular pop song, it was a literal, undeniable cultural phenomenon, a deeply emotional, flawlessly produced masterpiece by B.I. that topped the Korean music charts for a jaw-dropping, record-breaking 41 consecutive days, won the prestigious Song of the Year Daesong at multiple major award shows, and became a literal national anthem that was passionately sung by
massive stadium crowds to literal kindergartners on the playground, embedding itself permanently into the fabric of Korean pop culture. In 2018, iKON was sitting proudly at the absolute highest, dizzying peak of the K-pop mountain, proving to the entire world that their self-produced hip-hop DNA was powerful enough to rival absolutely anyone, and the entire entertainment industry was fully, breathlessly prepared for them to take the exact same massive, explosive global leap that BTS was currently taking across the ocean. But then, in the blink of a terrifying eye, the entire sky violently darkened, and the glorious, seemingly untouchable empire of iKON was completely, brutally, and irreparably shattered in one of the most shocking, devastating, and rapidly unfolding controversies the Korean entertainment industry has ever seen. In 2019, a massive, terrifying tsunami of criminal scandals violently crashed into YG Entertainment, severely crippling the massive agency's reputation. But the absolute fatal, heart-stopping blow to the group came in June when the infamous Korean tabloid Dispatch shockingly exposed highly controversial chat logs from 2016, alleging that iKON's leader, main producer, and creative soul, B.A.P, had attempted to purchase illegal drugs. In the hyper-conservative, deeply unforgiving, and ruthlessly strict landscape of Korean society, this wasn't just a simple scandal, it was an absolute, instant, and irreversible death sentence for an idol's career. Within mere hours of the explosive report hitting the internet, the entire K-pop world was thrown into absolute sheer pandemonium, and in a deeply heartbreaking, highly controversial move that still makes devoted fans scream in agonizing frustration to this very day, B.I. immediately announced his permanent, immediate departure from the group, officially severing his exclusive contract with YG Entertainment to supposedly protect the remaining members from the vicious, burning public fallout. Can you even begin to comprehend the sheer, suffocating, and catastrophic devastation of that exact, horrifying moment? Imagine a world-conquering ship suddenly, violently losing its captain, its compass, and its entire engine all at once in the middle of a raging, deadly ocean. B.I. wasn't just a highly popular member, he was the literal, undeniable backbone of iKON's entire musical identity, the creative genius who single-handedly wrote, composed, and directed nearly their entire discography, including the legendary Daesong-winning Love Scenario. Without his visionary guidance, the remaining 6 members were violently thrust into a pitch-black, highly traumatizing abyss of uncertainty, forced to watch helplessly as their massive, unyielding momentum completely evaporated into thin air, and their deeply loyal, fiercely passionate global fandom fractured into millions of broken, crying pieces. The agency immediately, coldly halted all their planned promotions, violently erasing B.I. from pre-recorded music videos, heavily editing him out of variety show appearances, and throwing the rest of the deeply traumatized group into a freezing, agonizing hiatus, while the absolute biggest rival of their entire career, BTS, continued to majestically ascend into the global stratosphere, securing historic Grammy nominations and selling out the legendary Wembley Stadium. Although the remaining members of iKON bravely tried to push forward, wiping their tears and eventually participating in the brutal survival show Kingdom Legendary War in 2021 in a desperate, deeply emotional attempt to reclaim a fraction of their lost glory, the absolute, undeniable truth was deeply, painfully obvious to everyone watching. The magical, unstoppable fire that once threatened to consume the entire world had been permanently, tragically extinguished, leading them to ultimately, quietly leave YG Entertainment as a group in 2022 to forge a brand new, highly uncertain path under a completely different, smaller label.
It violently forces us to stare at the fading ashes of their former untouchable glory, clench our jaws in sheer disbelief, and ask the ultimate, heartbreaking question that will forever haunt the K-pop industry.